Welcome back to the 1090 podcast. I'm here with Conner Furu. Conner, have you ever seen the movie Shanghai with Chris Farley when he's the ninja?
I know of it. Isn't there Beverly Hills Ninja?
Beverly Hills Ninja.
Yeah.
What was I thinking?
Yeah.
But isn't his name Haru?
I think so.
It is.
Something like that.
Haru!
Yeah.
So that will help me with your name.
Yeah.
It's just like that, but with an M.
People try too hard. I just say, like, let it fall out, just Furu.
Furu.
Yeah.
Don't try so hard.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
We have Conner Furu, who flew in from Austin, Texas.
Yes,
Are you a Stone Cold Steve Austin fan?
No, I'm
Oh, Conner.
I don't hate him by any means. I was never a wrestling
You
guy.
weren't a wrestler guy.
I wasn't a wrestler guy.
That's too bad.
I enjoy his celebration. The two beer cans. Yeah, that's great.
When that glass broke and he came storming out with that leather jacket on. That was like the best thing in my
childhood. He had like a crazy show. I thought where he had like a bunch of people like come and just do crazy obstacles.
It's like a Survivor type show.
I think it was like Stone Cold Ranch or something like that.
Yeah.
A Broken Skull. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, I remember that show. Okay, we're going to have a good episode with Conner today. We appreciate you coming out here. For our intro today, I got a wonderful text message from Jen Peterson, who we had on maybe like a month ago. And we were just chatting, and she sent me this text message, and I love it. And so I'm just going to read it. Okay. This is from Jen. There's things every person appreciated having others do while grieving, and things that were on the opposite end that were offensive. People have said to me that they felt bad they didn't come say or do something sooner, but I actually appreciated that people would come later and in their own timing. It was always the perfect timing in my opinion, and I wish more people knew that. Even almost 10 years later, I still feel that way. We are not supposed to fix grief by words or some kind of token given, because there's no such thing. Rather, we are supposed to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort. Every interaction I experience has been very specific to my situation, so I know others have specific things that were useful in feeling comforted. For example, I had a stuffed animal given to me that had magical powers. Whenever we missed Natalie or needed to tell her something, we could hold that close, and the stuffed animal would deliver the hug or message to Natalie. It was a great tool because it showed me which kids were in need of extra attention or help. I also found that I would carry it around myself sometimes too. I started giving them as friends of mine had lost loved ones too. So that is why my belief in sharing what helps may be a worthwhile podcast to share. Giving options for action or idea for healing and help rather than just being vague like I was. Anyways, look at me writing a novel. Sorry, with hand in the face emoji and the laughing emoji. And then Jen, she gave Blue and I it's called like a grief gorilla.
Yeah.
But like just she was talking about with Natalie, who passed away, her daughter. It's like a middleman, messenger, gateway symbolism thing that you can do for your dead loved ones. And I just love the idea. And so she gave some to Blue, and Blue hugs the gorillas and talks to them now. And it's just great. I wanted to read that.
Yeah.
And I feel like people leave the podcast and they're probably like, oh, I wanted to say that, and I just didn't get to say that. And so she messaged me this. I'm like, oh, man, I got to read this because I think it's good. And then, Conner, you remember I read one of it was about grief.
Yeah.
And it was so good. I read it. That was a while ago, like maybe a year ago.
Well, this has been in the process for a while. Like, just trying to work it out and whatnot. So I'm glad we got to. But, and I think to what you just said about the grief gorilla, I don't know if you know the old saying, like, misery loves company. And usually it's said in, like, a negative connotation.
No, that's in a Metallica song.
Yeah. And usually it's used in, like, a negative connotation. Yeah. And I think it can also be seen in a positive light, like negative or misery needs company.
Yeah.
Because that, like, you need to get through it. And, you know, I've loved the analogy, and I know you've used it a ton, and you might have been the first person I heard it from, but like with the buffalo, right?
Yeah.
Like going into the storm. And in my mind, you can have 3 options. You can either run away from the storm, which doesn't equip you. It just makes you too tired to fight it when it catches up to you. You can, you know, sit down and just hope to weather it. And, you know, that might work out. But you don't really gain any tools in the process. You just know that you can bear that threshold of a storm. But like walking into it, you come out on the other side knowing that you attacked it and you're going to be able to bear it. So, you know, I think in that, and like that was one of my favorite things. I think honestly, the first time I was introduced into, you know, you seeing a clip of you kind of describing that. But yeah, I think that grief gorilla, you know, you need to go with people. You won't see a buffalo by himself or herself going.
They don't really run alone. They're usually with a herd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you start thinking like misery needs company, I think about when I was a college athlete, when our team got really close in fall camp, our coach had this thing where every night a group of guys were forced to go up and share a struggle. And usually it was like a waterfall effect. Some guys would be like, I got injured, you know, I've lost a grandpa, or like, you know, whatever. But then it just took one guy to like really open up. And then it was just a snowball effect where you just realize like, oh my gosh, like I'm around 100 guys who've really been through some stuff. And then you like come out as a better team on the other end, because you're like, I'm with a bunch of people that have been miserable at one time in their life. And for whatever reason, they're still here. They're still doing what they're doing. And they're choosing to line up next to me and, you know, continue towards a common goal. You know, that I think that's one of the biggest things about, you know, misery in that sense, is that you really need other people who have been through misery to get through yours.
No, I love like a grief group.
Yeah.
Like you need to be with other people who have lost a kid or whatever it is similar to your story. Like that's a very powerful thing. And yeah, I think you're right. I think that's always kind of used in like a negative light. But no, like people who are suffering certain pains, if they can find other, that's the whole point of the podcast almost, is like, let's try to just connect people through these stories. Cause we're all going through some type of shit storm, don't you think? Yeah. And if you're not, like, you will.
Yeah.
Just give me a second. Welcome back to the 1090 podcast. Life's 10% what happens to you and 90% what you're going to do about it. Conner, before we dive into your story and what you're doing as a motivational speaker, and what else are you doing? Mostly motivational speaking right now?
Yeah, motivational speaking. I work in sales as well.
Nah, we don't need to talk about sales. Although motivational speaking, you're kind of a salesman.
Believe it or not, I actually think it's helped me being able to connect.
I think being a high school teacher really helped me.
100%.
Just because you're up in front of a crowd 7 hours a day trying to be entertaining at some level, so they'll want to learn psychology.
Or even being a coach, for a short time after college, before I realized I couldn't live off, low-income housing and tuna fish, basically.
Top ramen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Cup of noodles.
But even that, being able to be articulate and concise in what you're trying to say, I definitely think it's helped. But, I mean, my passion's, sharing my story and connecting with people.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
But you were a college football player. Where'd you play?
Drake University.
Drake. I always think of the Seinfeld episode, nobody likes the Drake.
Yeah.
So you're a sports guy.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your top 4 greatest athletes of all time.
So, question for you: is it greatest athletes or greatest people in their sport? Because listen, sorry.
No, I appreciate the question because you're right. Like Tiger Woods, he'd be in there if we're talking best at his sport.
Yeah.
But no, he's not in my opinion. No, I'm talking athletics.
Yeah, I'm being a football guy. I got to put Bo Jackson number 1.
You sound like my brother. Yeah.
I mean, in my mind, you got to. If you see a clip of someone putting a wooden baseball bat on their head, not even pounding it, just pulling it down and snapping it, I mean, that guy's unreal.
He's on the list automatically.
Yeah. You could throw, I hate to throw another baseball guy, but like a Deion Sanders type. Usain Bolt got to. This is actually a hot take, and I got recently into it. I can't do it at all because of all my injuries, but I'm super interested into it. I think Alex Honnold. Yeah,
the free
solo.
Oh, I love that.
I think that's the greatest athletic feat anyone has ever done.
Yeah.
Just one, because if you make a mistake, you're dead.
Right.
from that perspective.
Right.
But I was speaking with a friend about it, who was another teammate of mine, and I just said, I think it's Alex Honnold. And then it was like, yeah, I can't think of anything that would top that.
Yeah.
It's like at all. And I would honestly put him as far as just.
I never thought about that, but that's so funny because I love him so much.
Yeah. He's such an interesting character to watch, and I'm a big fan of Jimmy Chin as well.
I don't know who that was.
He's the photographer that does the free solo with him.
Oh man!
And he's like considered one of the best, if not the best, like extreme sports photographers, because he also climbs with Alex to do the photography for National Geographic and all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
I throw a wild card in there with a climber.
That is a hot take.
Yeah,
I've never heard of a climber in there. But my brother Ace, he loved to rock climb too, so I don't mind it. Bo Jackson, let me just give you a little let me fight you on Bo for a minute. He was hurt though. He never really played. That's my only argument.
Well, I mean, fair enough.
Yeah. It's like you have a Ferrari.
Yeah.
But the engine don't work.
No, but if the engine works one race and it smokes every single other car.
Good point.
You know, if we're just talking peak, who do I want for one game?
One game, one time.
Yeah.
That's a good argument. For sure. Yeah. But I do think being an athlete is like you have to do it for a little bit though.
Oh, 100%.
So that's why like I don't know what to do with Bo. But yeah, it's hard to not put Bo on the list. I also like MJ.
Yeah.
But
the thing is, like, I would argue that probably like there's a handful of people that are probably better athletes that are taller, stronger, maybe not as good of a basketball player.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'd say maybe even throw Shaq in there. You could, but
I love Shaq.
Yeah. But yeah.
Let's talk about your public speaking. What are some things you like about it? What are some things that are hard about it?
I think one thing I love about it is being able to still be invested. I love speaking with everybody, but with student athletes specifically, coming up in a, you know, being able to connect with them on a more personal level, just given my story. I think I can connect with just about anyone given my story, and I love doing it. But being able to connect with kids, you know, even high school to college, that, you know, I can relate to from a wide variety of, you know, demographics. I think the hardest thing, which I also love too, is I was never a vocal guy. You know, it's hard given all my injuries, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but it's hard when you're recovering from injuries constantly to be a really vocal leader on the team. And so I didn't get into public speaking. Like, I was told by my players, like fellow players and coaches, like, hey, you need to speak, you need to share your story. And I was like really hesitant to do it. But basically I had my first speaking event a few days after the most traumatic experience of my life, where I basically thought to myself, I need to do the opposite of what I've been doing for the last, 20 some odd years, because I'd just been internalizing, repressing all my, pain and, struggles that I had been going through. And I just got to a tipping point where it's like, I need to shift to the complete opposite. So I went to a high school, to kids I didn't know, to people I didn't know, and just shared in real time, what I was going through, and also just my story up to that point. And it became sort of therapeutic for me. So it's hard because I'm not a natural speaker when it comes to wanting to just get up in front of a bunch of people. But it's, selfishly, I get something out of it too, because it doesn't make struggles I went through any less hard to deal with, but it allows you to, kind of bear them better. Kind of like we talked about in the intro of, walking into the storm. It doesn't make it easier, but you're able to bear it better. And for the next storm coming on, you're, better able to analyze it, as I'm sure you've probably found, your pain and grief hasn't subsided, but that doesn't mean you're not better able to manage it when it, has a flare up. And there was an amazing analogy in your podcast the other day that I listened to, where someone described grief as like a ball going around like a box and then just hitting like a button, and you never know when it's going to hit, but it just might, hit you.
I think that was Seth Gale, but yeah, I love that analogy because there's so much randomness to it. And then the button gets smaller and smaller. But, or maybe it was Jen. I don't even, or maybe it was Chad.
Yeah, it might have been.
Oh man, I'm like the worst.
But I heard that.
I think it was Chad actually.
Yeah,
Chad Peterson.
Whoever said it.
It's amazing what can be accomplished if no one gets the credit. So there you go. Someone said it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just, it's, I love that the button gets smaller, but it never goes away. You don't know when it's gonna, hit you at any given time.
What would you say to some public speak? Do you call it public speak or motivational speak? I have a hard time.
I have a weird
calling myself a motivator because I'm not like a rah. Like,
Me neither.
I'm more of like, this is hard and I'm sorry.
We talked about this. I think we FaceTime, like, was it 6 months ago?
I remember this, yeah.
Yeah, and we talked about, listen, I've known speakers who are like the rah guys and like they're great. But I think the most important thing is like if you are just practicing like the same talk consistently all the time, you take the authenticity out of it. And I would rather, have some mistakes, throw in some ums. Listen, when I first started speaking, I put the and dumb. Like I always say, because I just didn't, I wasn't as, concise and articulate as I'd want to be. But being authentic and, someone like yourself, you don't have to be the rah person, and neither do I, because that's not authentically who I am. Like I said, I wasn't the vocal guy. I hope my story is still, moving, and I believe it is when I share it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to try to be someone I'm not when I'm on the stage. I try to be, calm and, convey my message the best way I can. But I'm not going to push my authenticity aside because of it. And I think you connect with people better because of it.
Well, I think I remember, and I've done a couple of these. People reach out like, can you just give me some advice about public speaking? Trying to get started, blah, blah, blah. And I don't really do them anymore. But the couple I did, like the one I did with you, I mean, you probably remember better than me, but I basically said like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, 100%.
Okay, the buffalo analogy.
Yeah.
It's a great analogy. But let's say the car accident never happened with my family, and I was just a basketball trainer and that's on fire.
Yeah.
And I made this video about the buffalo analogy and posted it.
Yeah.
It would get 118 likes, maybe. I don't know. Like maybe not even that. It would just be whatever. But the weight of what happened to my family and then me saying that's what gives it meaning, I think. Or that's what makes more people care.
100%.
And so in my mind as a public speaker, I'm like, I think one of the strengths I have is I am self-aware. Like I get it. I understand where I'm at. I was good at that as a basketball player. I was good at that as a husband and a father. I understand my strengths and weaknesses. I'm not the best guy, probably not the worst guy though. Not showing off, not falling behind, as George Costanza would say. But like literally in my head, I'm like, a lot of these things I'm saying and telling people, I already did and believed before the car accident.
Yeah.
But it's so funny to me. Like if I would have got up here without what happened to my family and said it, no one would give a shit. I mean, no one gives a shit anyway. But like, no, it wouldn't have the same power. And so I understand that like when people ask me for advice for public speaking, that I'm just good because what happened to my family. Like, let's just be honest. Yeah. Like, no one would really listen to Mason's story if it wasn't for what happened to Courtney Riggins, Frankie, Race, and Ryder. So I think that just keeps me very humbled and like without the weight of the story, I don't know how good of a public speaker I'd be. And so I think being a public speaker is terrifying. It is so scary. And I just want to commend you for trying to do it because, and you tell me if you've had this feeling, but you kind of pour your heart out and then it feels like no one's liking it, no one cares. And you're like, what the hell? Like the frustration of it. I don't know if you've ever felt that.
Yeah, I have. And it was one of my first speaking engagements that I did, that I was speaking at this, private small school back in Washington. And I thought I did awful. Like it was just terrible. And everyone, there was like, a couple hundred kids in there. Everyone walked out afterwards after we said, I'll stay around for 15 minutes to chat with anyone. Besides, like, but one kid showed up, and one kid pulled up, and he asked me, I found my mom, OD'd a few months back, and my dad's going down the same path. How do I help my little brother? And at this time I'm 22. I'm just like,
shit.
Like you give the best, the best advice you can in that moment. To be honest, I don't even remember what I said. But in that moment, I was like, all right, I knew I did poorly there. I think I bombed, as a comedian would probably say. But I connected with one person. Like, that's something.
And that keeps you going.
And that's why whenever I speak to somewhere, I give my number out, because in case, as I was telling you before we started, if in case a kid needs some help with something, a lot of the time they don't feel comfortable, whether it be going to teammates, going to coaches, because a lot of like just men in general want to keep this facade going. And I fell into that completely, as far as like just pushing down like all emotion, possible, just to, man up and, grind it out. And I'm also not someone to say that you should, if you should tell everyone all your problems. Like, there is a point where it's like, all right, like, pull your bootstraps up and figure it out, sort of thing. Right. However, I realized that you need to be vulnerable, but like selectively, and
pick your moments, like, when appropriate.
Yeah, but also find a core group of people where, I'm being vulnerable among strength, because I think vulnerability can be a weakness or a strength. If you choose to be vulnerable around people you don't know at a bar, out of nowhere, and choose that, like, you might get someone who continues down that path of weakness because of your vulnerability. But instead, I found a group of, a select few friends who know what I've been through, also have been through things themselves, that I can share and not be judged for it, but also, gives me strength from being vulnerable. Because of that, like, you see that a lot with like military or police. Like, a lot of those men and women, like, generally, I might be assuming, but don't want to speak to a ton of therapists, because it's like, what can you tell me? You've never been through what I've been through, whether it be in action or whatever. But why they confide in each other, because they view those people as like, strong pillars in their life. And I think that's important to find and be selectively vulnerable with, those types of people.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think being vulnerable is, 1090 podcast is a very vulnerable podcast, but I think you're right. I think you have to pick the right spots and moments. Like, you can't choose to be vulnerable when the moment or situation you're currently in is really not about you. There's something bigger going on.
Yeah.
And now we're going to be vulnerable and make it about you now. Like, I get that. The timing of it. I think one thing that helps me with the motivational speaking too is just this ability to not care too much. You have that too, you think? Or
yeah, I think
you kind of have to have it.
You have to. And one thing I don't know if you dealt with this in basketball, but growing up, I put all of my self-worth into the sport of football.
Yeah,
every ounce
all
of it.
My eggs are in the basketball basket.
Yeah, and I really found my value in like the external validation I got from people who didn't matter in my life, if I'm being frank. I grew up surrounded by addiction, with my dad, and my uncle died of his addiction, and other things like that, where I was told at a young age to change my name, and a lot of that came from or the value I felt that wasn't there. I felt because of what I could do on the football field, and which was great for a while until like injuries and things started happening where I was taken away from the field, and it's like, all right, now what am I? And like, if I wasn't a football player, then do I want to be anything at all? Which was tough. And for me, there was one time we were in Beijing my sophomore year, because we played like the first Division I game on like Asian soil. It was great. I was injured, so I didn't play. But one of my quarterback on our team, who's still one of my best friends, said, my dad used to tell me, but now I get it because we're actually in China, that there's 1 billion people in China that don't give a shit that you play football. And then when I, went to India and did some work in like anti-human trafficking, I'm like, there's 7 billion people on the earth who don't give 2 shits I play football.
Right.
And frankly, even if you want to expand that to even like the Tom Brady's of the world, or like the best players of all time, they might be a couple more billion people that know who they are. But even them, like, there's most people have no idea who you are, no matter how famous you are, outside of being maybe like a president or something. And it's like that gave me sauce. Was like, if I mess up, most people aren't gonna.
There's so much power in it.
Yeah,
I remember I was a high school basketball coach because my career as a player ended, and just like you, I'm like, well, shit, like, so I decided to coach basketball. Like, the next best thing, basketball is my identity still. So I become this high school basketball coach, and I remember losing a couple games, and I just can't stand it. Like, I hate losing, and I'm so mad. And then my old high school basketball coach, Coach Briggs, who's still coaching, he calls me and we're chatting. He's like, "So how's how's it going?" And I'm like, "Not good. Like,
terrible.
I can't stand losing."
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "How do you do it?" He's like, "Well, Mace, like when you drive home after the high school basketball game that you guys lost, every house you drive by has no clue that there was even a game tonight. Mm-hmm. Like, it's all in, like, in your mind, it's everything, but no one really knows or cares." Yeah. Like, and it was like, I'm like, yeah, like, I think he's right. Like, no one really, but I remember like when I was in high school, because I was on a really good high school basketball team, I honestly thought, like, if you just went randomly around West Jordan City and knocked on every door, every 5 doors, they'd be like, "Yeah, I know the point guard of West Jordan High School is Mason Sorkin." Like, no one actually ever cared. And now as a motivational speaker, this is actually a big part. I mean, there's a whole section I talk about that no one cares. And I want to do this with you because an example I use is football. And I asked the crowd, who won the Super Bowl 3 years ago? You're a football guy. Do you have any idea?
To be honest, I got done playing. I got done coaching.
Yeah, no one knows.
I know like guys who still play. I'll stay in touch. Yeah. But like, I'm detached. I'm a big F1 fan. If you want to talk F1, we can do that.
That's the point, though. Like, and I've talked to football teams, and no, like, you really have to think about it or Google it.
Yeah.
And the point is like, listen, it's forgotten. No one fucking cares that much. Yeah. And it's funny that you brought up the president of the United States, because I'll ask him that. I'll ask him, who is the 23rd president of the United States? No one knows. Yeah. And I'm like, you can be the president and no one's going to care. And then the final one I ask him is, who's your great-great-great-great-grandfather's name? No one knows. I mean, maybe some like Mormons in Utah that do genealogy, but most people don't know.
Yeah.
And like, it just kind of hits them like, oh shit. And I just let us sit in the silence of it for like 5 seconds. I'm like, yeah, like no one cares. Now, and then I usually say something like, I am a motivational speaker. Like, give me a second, it'll get better. But like, yeah, like that needs to settle in. Like, because I think there's a lot of power in that, is realizing like you're just, a lot of your issues, problems, anxiety, stress is in your own head. It's made up. No one else even knows it exists or cares. Yeah. And it's like you have a pimple on your face in high school and you're worried, like, oh, I'm going to get, no one's going to notice, actually. No one notices. But we're caught up in this program or system that I think humans, we care about weird things and we think other people care about it, but they don't. How do you, as a public speaker, what keeps you motivated to keep going, understanding that, you know, in the big picture, no one really cares what I'm saying?
I think it's an interesting question.
Or you could just be wrong. You could just disagree. It's like, no, I think it does matter. Like, maybe it does. And
I think to an extent, like, I think it does matter. But there was and might be a long-winded story, so I apologize. But
no, we got time.
Yeah, we got time. I'm in one of my newsletters. I wrote one of the first ones.
I like your newsletters, by the way.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
But one of my first ones that I did was about defining your life, and it was based off the fact that I had a fellow running back who was actually my mentor at college, a guy named Tyler Updegraff, that was everybody loved to death. Not because he didn't have a mean soul in his body, despite, what people might assume you need to be a running back in football. He was just the kindest, happiest, just exuded joy. And he died in a skiing accident, not this past winter, but the winter before. And everyone, you just saw the outpouring of just like the devastation of having lost someone, like that. And I remember, I'd messaged him back and forth just about some old team dinner stuff a week or two before that he passed. And, I hadn't talked to him in probably, 8 months or so because he was older. I was a freshman when he was a senior, type of thing. But we'd still kind of stayed in communication, and just a phenomenal guy. And then I see this outpouring from everyone talking about their experiences with Tyler and all this stuff. And I realized we have no say in how we define ourselves. Or the old history saying like history is written by the victors sort of thing. But history, like your legacy or how you're defined, is written by how much you invest in people while you're here, and then giving free will a go and just letting those people either, share your story or not. Like, I think it matters because someone like that or people who really impact you, if they pass on or something happens, you want to exude the joy that they gave you to other people. So a little bit of like a butterfly effect, if you will. Like, I can't help but think in your case, that's, probably true, trying to, one kind of the misery needs company sort of thing and helping like not inflict, but, invoke change or invoke, motivation or inspiration into someone. But, I think, yes, it doesn't matter, but at the same time it does because of that ripple effect, that it could have.
No, I mean, we don't have to get too philosophical into I can't even say the word philosophy. But like I do think there's like this weird thing that happens, like when nothing matters, then all of a sudden everything matters type of thing. And there's a lot of power in that. And I also, sorry about your friend. I think that's a really good analogy though. And I love, my mom told me this story once when I was a little kid. I know I mentioned it on the podcast before, but it was this guy, a bunch of starfish like washed up on the beach, like thousands of starfish. And this guy's just tossing all these starfish in the ocean, like one at a time, just hucking them. And this guy comes up, he's like, what are you doing? Like thousands of these things are already dead and you're not going to save all of them. Like, look how many you have to get to. And so the guy's like, what are you doing? And the guy just picks up another one. He's like, well, I made a difference to this one. Yeah. I made a difference to this one type of thing. Yeah. And I think that goes to what you were saying. You were doing that public speaking gig, and everyone walked out except that one person. And he came up to ask you that, and that was everything you needed, that you felt like you were making a difference with your pain and your thing. And so I love that, the thought behind the starfish story. That makes a lot of sense to me. But I also think like one thing that I've gotten really good at is just being in the moment. Like the past is gone. Yeah. The future doesn't exist. It's not real. So just be very much in the moment. And when you live in the moment, you can do a lot of good for a lot of people. And the moment might be forgotten and your name might be forgotten, but maybe the impression that you left, how you made people feel, even though no one's going to know who to give the credit to. Like as they go home and you maybe help change a moment they had with their kids or their like something. Yeah. I think there's a lot of power in that, and just being in the moment and not getting caught up in, is this going to lead to X, Y, and Z? Yeah. Is this going to get this? Like, no, like just stay in the moment with me and let's see what we can talk about and say and help each other. And then, life will keep going. We'll see what happens type of thing. But that's kind of how I see it. But I used to be so sad and mad that no one cared. And now I think I've just found the beauty and the power within it. And it helps with the fear, like not really scared of much now because no one cares type of thing, right? So I don't know. I like that idea a lot. Okay. Should we dive into your story now? Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, we're happy to.
I love this quote by you. I'm going to read it, and then maybe as you talk about why you wrote this, you can kind of unfold and start telling us your story type of thing. Okay. Does that sound good? Yeah. Unless there's anything else you want to say about public speaking.
No, we're good, man.
All right, we're good.
Yeah.
All right, here we go. Okay. There's no greater failure than being successful in becoming someone you never aspired to be. Conner Furu.
Yeah.
I love that. Break it down for us. What made you think of this? What does this mean to you? Type of thing.
Yeah, I think where that stemmed from is seeing, so many people, in my life, and even myself included, either put so much energy into the wrong thing for an unnecessarily long amount of time, whether it be affecting their, dreams and aspirations. I think the potential that someone has, we're constantly, given struggles throughout our life. And I think people often forego their dreams because, we get busy furnishing our prison cells, basically. And I'll explain what I mean by that. As we, are really young, we might want to be an astronaut, a pro athlete, a cowboy.
I wanted to be an NBA basketball player. And then I went to Florida for this national tournament, got my ass kicked. And I'm like, okay, not playing NBA basketball. Maybe I can play college basketball.
Yeah, but, and we have these lofty aspirations. And as we go on and as, more struggles are put into our lives, we might accept a job we don't like. And then we, push them off. So it's like, okay, maybe we'll get a certain amount of money and then, I'll come back to it or, all this types of stuff. But during that time, I think humans are so easily swayed into comfort where it's like, you might make a little bit of money, here and, you might, say I want to, buy a house, like have a family, all these things that are great, all and phenomenal things. Right. But, then filling your life with superficial things, like maybe you need a boat instead of, maybe starting a podcast that you want to do on a monthly basis or, other things. And you start furnishing this jail cell and you forget that it's even a jail cell at all.
It's like we're going outward.
Yeah.
Like we're just going outward with everything.
Yeah.
Like I want this, I want that. I want people to view me as this. I'm chasing this.
Yeah.
But we don't go inward enough.
Yeah.
It's like, no, like feel your emotions actually and talk to yourself and really like what do you think is most important in life? Do you really think it's this yacht or the like whatever it is that you want? Like that's really what you want?
Yeah. People are so infatuated with looking rich and wealthy. And listen, I want to be as wealthy as possible. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah, if someone's like, here's $1 billion, I wouldn't be like, no. I'd be like, all right.
but not to the extent where I forego, my values and my morals and things like that. And I think for me, such a long time in athletics, I was so focused on external validation. And that like, almost in a similar way how a lot of people want to try and look rich, now, that in my sense, I wanted to be this great football player and I wanted that to be my entire persona and everything my entire life. And, that worked out well for a while just because, at an early age, I became, really good at most athletics and then, started to get pretty good at football. And I'd put all my value into it based on what I kind of said earlier about, having a lot of addiction in my family, being told to change my name, growing up with a single mother household. And, I had a lot of things that I didn't know how to deal with. You don't have the tools at a young age to, handle a divorce, handle a father who's an addict, handle, the stress that came along that for a long period of time. And so I took out my frustration, with football, and that's how I kind of dealt with it. But in the, consequentially became my entire identity, and it worked until I started having injuries. My 7th grade year, I had a quad injury, put me out for the rest of the season. 8th grade year, ended up snapping my left tibia. My freshman year, snapped my right one, dislocated my ankle. Sophomore year, I was solid, got some varsity playing time, all this stuff. Junior year, that's kind of was my breakout season. I was doing great. I was averaging just shy of a first down per carry. I thought, this is, I'm done with my injuries. Bad luck's done. This is my time to go, hopefully get a scholarship and all this stuff. Break my collarbone game before going into the playoffs. Luckily I had enough tape to get some looks from colleges, but it was already kind of red flagged by some people, but still I was, very invested in that. Like football was my life. This is what I was going to do. This was my identity. Going into my senior year of, high school, we had one of the best backfields in the state with me and another guy. And there was no doubt in my mind I had won some MVPs at some camps the summer before that I was going to get a scholarship, go somewhere. However, coaches were very hesitant to recruit me just based on my injury history. I had, 4 season-ending injuries in the past 5 years. I was having the best season of my life, best game of my life, 4th game of my senior year, I believe. End up tearing my ACL. And then my life just, crumbled around me. It's like, will I even get to play, college football? And, I had so many messages. I was getting recruited by some big sky schools and some, smaller Division I, some Division IIs, and the countless emails or, messages I got saying, can't recruit you, things like that just validated in my head that I was only worth what I could do on the football field. And at that time, I just felt worthless. And from there, I made a promise to play again to my mom and my coach at the time, who really was probably the most pivotal male figure in my life at that time, was one of my football coaches in high school, who's a very imposing figure, parole officer. He was our O-line coach, really big guy, former D1 player, and promised him as well that they'd see me play again. Didn't think it would take as long as it did for them to see me play again, but it was at an early age being really confused. And part of the reason I'm so passionate about speaking to young athletes is because I remember, that identity crisis that I was suffering and didn't even realize I was suffering it, at the time, because as a young kid, that's all you really care about. And I'm sure you probably understand that.
Yeah, dude. It was like, I remember my senior year playing college basketball, like it was about to be over. And and I was really what am I gonna do with my life? Like, I have to pick it's literally all basketball. And then I met Courtney in high school. We fell in love. So it was basketball in my family. Like that was. What do you say, Conner? Okay, so you kind of had that perspective of sports growing up. Now that you've gone through what you've gone through, you've talked to people. Like, how is your view of sports or football? Has it changed? If so, what are you telling these young athletes from your story to help them, I guess?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I believe is the most important thing, which I share to every, high school, university, whatever I speak to, is it's all right if you love sports to death. And, I still enjoy football. I still have a love for it. But to be mission oriented rather than goal oriented, like for me, goals were great for me up until a point, and then goals were terrible for me because they were just metrics where I kept not hitting them, and it just dug me deeper and deeper into this hole of just despair, throughout my college career as well. And so, what I'd say is, find an underlying mission that you want to attain and make your sport your vessel to do that until you can't do it with that vessel anymore, and you need to find a new one. For instance, I spoke at a high school not too long ago, and, I asked why do anyone want to go to the NFL or, NBA or, what have you? And kids raise their hands and, you say, okay, why do you want to do that? Some of them might be like, I want money, I want fame, I want, nice cars, whatever. And, one kid said, I want to be able to help my family. And I'm like, all right, good. Like, that's great. Tomorrow you're going to be fine, but you're going to have a season-ending injury. Like, you can never play your sport again. Are you willing to go promise your family that eventually you'll be able to take care of them? And are you okay if it's not through the vessel of which you want it right now? Because I think it's selfish if you break it down in that regard to saying, you're willing to make that promise as long as it is by the circumstances that you kind of construct in your head. And so when I became more mission oriented was when I thought I kind of became a healthier, just psychological individual. And a lot of it came from going to India and doing some anti-human trafficking stuff that we can get into, but realizing that, my mission on this planet isn't to play football. I think right now I'm finding football as a way to pursue my mission, be the best version of myself, be able to, honor my family, create a good name for myself, and, create a lot of lasting memories and relationships. But realistically, there's other ways you can, do that. People say like football is the ultimate team sport, and I don't disagree. But you could also probably learn the same lessons in hockey or in basketball or in baseball. If I've seen speakers or some of my favorite individuals that I follow and watch, it's like if they, like Inky Johnson, I don't know if you're aware of him.
A lot of people say his name. I'm not sure.
Incredible story. Like he was a projected first overall draft pick, came up in the projects or in the in poverty in Atlanta with like 14 people. I think it was a 2-bedroom house sort of deal. I got a chance to meet him, and he was a projected first overall draft pick that was going to get his family out of poverty. Ends up having a career-ending injury.
Oh man.
That he lost all function of his arm. It's like, what about if you make a promise to your family now, it's like, hey, I'll take care of you eventually by any means necessary. That means by any means necessary, not, if he had only thought of that through the lens of football. It's like, I think he didn't have a mission. He had an imagination or a fantasy about it playing out that way. And it'd be great if it did, but I'm not saying he had that thought, but I think you need to get a thorough understanding of your mission in life in general. And then if a sport is the way in that season of your life that you share that mission with the world, I think that's great. But just playing, investing in a sport just for the sake of wanting recognition and validation through, accolades is something I fell into. I think a lot of athletes fall into, which isn't healthy. And, trying to get people to steer away from that as much as possible.
Yeah. I think, I mean, we're college athletes. I played college basketball. I was a high school basketball coach for a little bit. And I thought, I had let's see, how do I even put this, man? I think before the car accident with my family, I wanted to win.
Yeah.
I understood all the other things sports could do for you, but no, you got to win. We're here to win type of thing. And now my perspective of sports is okay, I want my kid to be part of something bigger than me. I want him to be part of a team and just understand teamwork, and it's not about you all the time, and how you can help your other teammates get better, showing up for your teammates. I think that's very, very important. And then just physical exercise in general.
Of course.
They're fun. That's
I'm sure Blue's got a ton of energy. It's nice to, if you're not coaching his team, nice to let him run around for a couple hours. Yeah.
They're fun. And they teach you a lot about life. And one of the things that they teach well is winning and losing. And that's something I want Blue to understand and learn from sports is how to handle losing. And man, I was so bad at that as a player and a coach. And I think coaches and players, they do all the game prep. They'll watch all the film, scouting report. Here's a game plan. And then the speech before the game, we're going to go out and kick them ass. And we're gonna, the whole thing. And then they lose. And then you're in the locker room. And I always handled this bad as a coach because you never think about losing. You never talk about losing. You never go in before a game we might legit lose this game.
Yeah.
We're playing a really good team.
Yeah.
We're going to have our... and so I was so bad at handling failure in the locker room with my team. I just wanted to get mad and just hated it so bad. And that's what I want my son to learn from sports is, okay, how do we handle failure? Let's talk about this. And I think so many people, coaches do it too, players do it too, is no one likes the blame of losing.
Yeah.
And then, parents today with sports, Connor, you just correct me if you think I'm wrong here, but it used to be you get cut from the team and your parents we got to work harder over the summer.
Yeah.
Or
yeah.
Or that, I don't know. That was kind of how it was for me growing up. Yeah. Now it's this coach is dumb.
Yeah.
And instead of allowing your kid to handle this failure and accountability and maybe work harder or just gain some self awareness from it, we're just no, you're amazing and you're amazing. And we're going to switch schools and switch things until we find a coach that thinks you're amazing. And what it turns into is the dipshit on American Idol who sucks at singing, shows up because his whole life his parents have been you're great. And then he sings and Simon's up there you suck, you can't sing. Yeah. And then he's that's what, and it's so frustrating to me. Listen,
just being like in an echo chamber of
like the chances of your kid playing college sports, slim to none, dude.
Yeah.
It is slim to none. But there are so many things your kid can get from these sports that will propel them and help them in their life if you just let them handle it the right way. But like, I feel like we're getting away from that. And it's all about, can I go to college? Can I go pro? Can I make money? Can I get the commercial? And that's what sports is turning into. And as you see, like sports like basketball and football, like players are going after money now instead of what's best for the team. And if you look at players like Tom Brady or Tim Duncan, some of the best, most successful.
Tom Brady was never more than the 16th highest paid quarterback.
He didn't take money.
Granted, he had a ex-wife now that made more money than he did. But neither here
and Tim Duncan did the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's why Tom Brady's the best, is he didn't take money.
Yeah.
And so he got good teammates. But no one else does that. Like, give me the max. I just want the max contract. It's like, what do you even believe in anymore?
Yeah.
And now, like, I honestly thought before the car accident, like, I would love it if Riggins or Blue or Frankie went pro in anything, went to college and got their that is the dream.
Yeah.
And then I can tell everyone, like, look at my kids, they went pro. And now I honestly think of it and like, if my kid went pro, I'd be terrified. Like, is he just going to be a rich asshole and think he's God's gift to the world now? Like, honestly, think about this, parents. Like, you think best case scenario, your kid becomes a professional athlete. That might be actually the worst thing.
It's. I think a lot of parents and a lot of just athletes now in general think they're God's gift to the game rather than the game being the gift to them.
Thank you. My 3-minute rant summed up in 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Thank you. Like, I think we're missing the whole point here.
Yeah. And I think to go back to a little bit about what you were saying, I mean, how important it is for whether it be any sport or anything in general, I think for young kids to participate in voluntary suffering, where it's like, obviously it can be fun. You don't want to like call that.
Right. But like, you got to get your ass up at 6 a.m.
Yeah. And I think it's a progression as you get older from young to old and you build up these tools and things. There was a quote that I heard David Goggins say that he's like, I don't run because I like running. I run because I'm, training my mind for when I get the call at 3 in the morning that my mom passed away. Where it's like, it's not going to make it any easier, but participating in some voluntary suffering gives you a better baseline for when life really throws shit at you. And I think you're probably better equipped than the person who hadn't been through, hard things.
Yeah, we're just back to the buffalo and cow analogy now. Yeah,
where it's like getting kids to unconsciously participate in just doing hard things in general. And I think it's so important, whether it be, running or basketball or football or anything, or whether it be, me with, my injuries and things. I see in hindsight now how important it was for me when I eventually did get to play after 1,646 days was in between my last high school and first college game. And, I made a play on punt because I had actually dislocated my hand. I was a running back, so I couldn't run the ball with it. I had dislocated my thumb a couple weeks before the game, but I went to my coaches and said, I need to play special teams. Like, I popped out with a knee brace, 2 shoulder braces, a hand like cast is split. I'm like, put me out there. And I was on punt, and I made a solo tackle on the sidelines. And, I talked about it. I was searching for all this external validation and stuff from fans. I made a solo tackle on punt that didn't get a clap, I would assume, in the stands. It was just like an average tackle. But the sideline went nuts. Like, my teammates ran out on the field because they knew what went into it.
Yeah, like there's the injury guy making a play.
Yeah, but I think that's this. And I realized that, everything I wished for didn't come true along that in my entire journey. I was injured. I didn't get the external validation, the accolades I wanted, but everything I should have been wishing for did. And, that value, the value I felt from when I saw my teammates crying for how happy they were for me. And I had 100 friends that I wanted to, or that, were just so happy for me. And I wanted to travel the country and play football, but I couldn't because I didn't travel. But I got to go to China and India, and I got to travel the world. And in hindsight, I was like, I wasted so much energy, probably with a little bit of that mindset of, that a lot of athletes have that I mentioned, like God's gift to the game rather than the game being the gift for you. And I think football was just a vessel to learn that lesson, for me, and how much just the sport gave me as far as relationships and lessons and things like that, and new passions and the anti-human trafficking stuff, and, being able to, keep promises to my family, because 1,600 was just about 4.5 years. I realized that was the biggest promise I'd ever made, and I'm just going to do it no matter what, because
like the Inky Johnson situation type thing.
Yeah. But I realized when I retore my ACL, my second practice back at Drake after doing a whole year of recovery, and then that put me out my sophomore year. I was like, I didn't say I was going to play again if everything lined up well for me. I said I was going to play again. And then that put me on my sophomore year. I'm set to potentially travel and start at fullback versus University of North Dakota, separate my shoulder out for my junior year. Senior year.
Some players are like this. I have a buddy, Robbie, that he could never stay healthy. Yeah. And it's a shame. And you just feel so bad that they never got to play.
Yeah. Well, and
it's really like the worst thing about sports is these 100%. Unfair injuries, man.
But I agree, yes and no. And so just to finish out, I separated my shoulder, was out my senior year. I come back and, my teammates were like, man, you're actually good at football. Because they had seen me. No, because they've
never seen you play.
They'd never seen me play much. But they came back and they're like, dude, you're actually pretty good. And I was competing for the starting spot my senior year, having no one ever seen me play. COVID cancels the season. And so now I'm in the best shape of my life. I'm the only running back on the team that was healthy during the fall. And I'm set to get a ton of playing time. COVID cancels the season, and I get a 6-game spring season. But then I had that revelation, when I played, and I had that moment when my teammates ran out on the field, and I had that. I'm like, okay, I get it. I told myself I would do this because I knew in the back of my head as an 18-year-old kid when I made that promise that this was the biggest promise I'd ever made. If I don't give everything I can to this promise, knowing I gave everything I can, that is going to make it far easier later in life to not be able, fulfill promises to my kids in the future, my spouse, my friends, my family, anything like that. Which that's exactly how it played out, because I thought that moment on the field was, that was the reason behind it. That was the epiphany moment. And then I couldn't have been more wrong. I go through a whole year of playing or of coaching, because I originally thought I was going to be a coach, and I alluded to the fact I had to give it up, and early in the podcast. And basically, I got to a point where I was just going back for Christmas. I had accepted a job in a brain rehab facility. I was going to go to grad school, all this stuff. And I go out to see my dad, who's been still suffering from his addiction, but I only had seen him about once a year up until this point. And he lived in the cabins out in the mountains in Washington.
I like this guy already.
Yeah, my grandparents' cabin, 100 years old, hardly any heat. And I found my dad in a rough shape. And I'd only really seen him, like I said, one time a year up until this point, because, our relationship was difficult, to say the least. And
I wanted to ask, but maybe keep going.
Anyway, and, I find him in really rough shape. Basically, he had just been drinking himself. He could hardly move.
And you said he was a drug addict when you were...
So it's alcohol. Alcohol, and he had been, he had other substances involved based on other medical needs he had. But
mostly alcohol.
Yeah, mostly alcohol. But then he had a ton of medical issues where then you're mixing medications into it and a bunch of stuff. And so I find him in terrible shape. Long story short, have this huge situation where we're taking him to different hospitals. They basically said, your dad's dying, go take him home, make him comfortable. We're not suited to treat him, all this stuff. Didn't accept that. Drove him closer to my hometown.
He didn't accept that?
No, we didn't accept that. Okay. He wanted us to take him back. I think he was in a very odd state of mind, just based on, he was going through withdrawals in the car and, all this stuff. And then, we get him to a hospital, and between me and my sister sat in the ER for 17 hours, waiting to be seen. And during that time period, I was sitting with my dad, and, as he was going through withdrawals and things, he didn't remember who I was. He was just looking at me, blank stare. He was in rough shape, to say the least.
Oh.
And then basically he finally gets taken back to a bed in a hallway in the hospital. And because they were so overrun with COVID at this time and things like that, they just got him a bed, basically. So I go through this whole ordeal, going to multiple hospitals, having doctors tell us he's going to die. And, we finally get him into a hospital room to have some doctors see him. And I go to just take a load off, have a cup of coffee. It was the worst day of my life, going through it. Realized I was going to have to give up my job because I handle stuff, here. That came a couple days later, but basically just had a cup of coffee in the cafeteria, came back, and all hell had broken loose. Really, I mean, my dad garnered whatever strength he had left and was going through withdrawals, not cooperating with the nurses, being fairly physical, and the only person in that mind, like the security was dealing with homeless outside, like they weren't engaged. And I came back in the hallway and I was like, I'm the only one who can restrain my dad right now in this thing. And I pinned my dad down in the hallway on a bed while nurses, because there were smaller nurses, couldn't handle him. And he looked into my eyes, didn't recognize who I was, and was just angry.
Is he saying like, "Who are you?" Or
no, just like, he had lost knowledge of who I was a few hours before. He was just very spacey and very jaundiced and so on. And anyone who's dealt with, extreme alcoholism like that, who I've spoken to, knows exactly what I'm talking about. And just because of all the toxins, his liver was failing, was clouding his, mind and the ability for him to process things. And in that moment, I looked in my dad's eyes and I wasn't crying. I wasn't screaming. I wasn't mad. I knew I was extremely calm the whole time. And once the security came and ripped me off my dad and all this stuff, doctors came and, walked me outside, sat me down, and said, like, you did all you can do. Just, relax and things like that. And the emotions came later, but I realized in that moment, looking into my dad's eyes, and he didn't recognize me, that was, believe it if you want to or not, but that was the physical manifestation of 100 years of addiction. My grandfather was an addict. My uncle died of his addiction. I had other uncles who suffered from addiction. I had other distant family, relation with suicide and things of that nature. And it was like, in this moment, it ended with me because of all the discipline of that voluntary suffering I talked about through football and all these, all these other kind of struggles I went through. I was like, I just ended 100 years of pain because my grandfather struggled greatly with it, and, had a lot of repressed pain. And same with my uncle who died, and my, very close family friends, who were like, uncles and things to me, suffered from it as well. And I was like, I knew in that moment that would never end, with me. And so basically they were giving my dad a couple days, to live. They were saying that we were talking to hospice, getting him settled in and everything. And, realizing that my life, I wasn't moving back to the Midwest as planned after this. I had to stay back in Washington and get things all settled. And during that time, it was the day after I was running on just a few hours of sleep, my mom reminded me that I had promised my nieces, who lived about a 3-hour round trip-ish away, about an hour and a half up into Seattle, that I had promised my nieces that I was going to bring a dollhouse up to their place and that they would have it by the end of the week. And it was Sunday that it happened. And I was like, okay. She's like, I'm sure they won't remember it if you don't bring up this dollhouse. And I literally thought to myself, I was like, I made the promise that I was going to play football again.
Yeah, this is...
Because that...
You don't break promises.
No, that I don't break promises. And I was like... And she's
They'll
like,
get their fucking dollhouse.
Yeah, and my mom was like, I'm sure they won't remember, like, you've had a lot. And I was like, no, like, I'm taking it. And I go up there, take the dollhouse, talking with my older sister, going through this whole ordeal, just kind of talking with her about the day. And my nieces were with a friend in, like, the playroom, like, the separate room that we were off from the kitchen. And I heard her say, one of my nieces say, my Uncle Conner promised that he'd have a dollhouse up.
Aw.
And this was the last day. Like, sort of thing. So
see, that's the
and I just started like, and like, I didn't know if they would ever remember that, but I was like, I would know.
See?
And so I say that because then I was like, well, that's the moment. And then in the days, kind of after that, I'm like, this, it's always the next moment. It's like all of the things that struggles you go through lead to the next moment where you have to conquer it, get over that obstacle, what have you. And, and that was what led me to public speaking. Days after that occurred, while my dad was in the hospital, I made my first speaking gig because I was like, I used to have problems speaking with anybody. In meetings in college, there were times after my injuries where I didn't even like speak for weeks. And I remember one moment we were in our meeting room and a coach asked me a question and I like answered something that was like on the board for a play that we were doing. And everyone like was shocked and started clapping because I said something. Like I would go mute. I just like repressed everything. And it's like, I'm just going to deal with this on my own type of deal. And that's how I got into speaking, is because I was like, all right, I got to do the opposite of this shit because I'm in a rough place right now.
Totally me. What I was thinking. Like, all right, let's do the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah.
And start talking about it. Because I didn't talk about anything for basically a year. Like, couldn't talk about it. It made it much too real and painful.
Yeah. And I spoke for an hour. It was my old high school, so they just let me come in and speak, and it was terrible. I'm sure I think they got some value, but it was just going off in a bunch of different directions.
It was great for you though.
Yeah, it was very therapeutic. And
because one thing talking is, at least I feel, is it's in your control. And so it's something you can do. You're taking power back.
Yeah.
And I love that, because grief and shame, like, they just make you feel powerless, but talking gives you some power back.
Yeah.
And I think laughing too, like, if you can laugh at it, then like, wow. I love being able to laugh too.
I texted you before this podcast. Had you read the book Man's Search for Meaning?
Yeah.
And that I wanted to chat with you about, because there's a quote in that book that I love so much. And I mean, Viktor Frankl was a psychologist, Jewish, throughout the Holocaust, survived the concentration camps. While he was in the concentration camps, wrote that humor's our soul's way of self-preservation.
Yeah.
Even through all the struggle. And like, this guy is someone who saw his family, basically be executed, like, go in a different direction in him in the concentration camps. And he's still trying to find humor.
Well, imagine these Nazi guards walking past I didn't
know we were going into World War II stuff. This is great.
No, really think about it though. These Nazi guys, and then if they just heard a bunch of Jewish people laughing, that'd be awesome. That's the total fuck you. That'd be like, wow, like still being able to laugh, like you're in control.
Yeah.
Type of thing. Wow. I didn't know. I haven't read that book in a while. I haven't read it since after the car accident. I should read it again. But I didn't know he had the humor involved too. I love that so much.
Yeah, and the quote that humor's our soul's like attempt at self-preservation.
So good.
Through anything.
True.
Yeah, like if I like when I was back speaking, I know I've continued to train, stay in good shape, and one of our coaches, when I went up to speak, we're like, man, do you still got any eligibility? And I was like, man, we all know how that would end up. And it got a huge laugh, right? But it's like, laughing at yourself, in that respect, like, trying to find the humor, anywhere there is so, some people, it might turn some people off based on, but at the same time, I know some people with some tough stuff, and the only way to get through it for them, and this is just an individual. It's every person has their own way of grieving. Sometimes it's through something humorous, about their situation, but just trying to find light in darkness. And I was going through such a rough time one time, and I was during the whole ordeal with my dad, and my friends know kind of my sense of humor, and they like made a not like a bad joke or anything, but like a comment on it. And there was just like a pause, and we just started like both like dying laughing. Right. And, that was so therapeutic, for me to acknowledge it happened. I think I heard you say, that, one of the worst parts about your situation was when people, tried not to talk around or talk about it around you or something along those lines. And or maybe like people have like tried to tiptoe, and I don't know about for you, like it obviously helps you talking about, your situation. But being able to, find that bright spot in like the darkness, I think there's an example where my mom had lost a child before I was born, and it was at her child's funeral, about my brother, that the pastor came up and said something to her that I think at first took her back, and like, why would you say that to me? But he said, everyone's going to be watching you, because they're going to want to know how they would respond if something else happened to their child. And there's a quote that I had on my locker every day, and I think that it's a perfect example of this. And I don't care if anyone's religious at all, but this to me is just good advice. And it was Romans 5:3-4, and it's not only so, but we glory in our sufferings, because suffering produces perseverance, perseverance character, and character hope. And I think for you, I assume what's got you through it is the ability to now help other people, with it. And for me in football, I leaned on that verse because I'm like, listen, I'm not going to be the guy who's going to be All-American anymore. Like, I've had too many injuries. I haven't played. Like, it's just not going to happen. But I was like, maybe my role on this team is to work as hard as possible with like no promise of any like good results, which gives no one else on the team a reason not to work hard. And I think, so much power is in bearing your suffering nobly. I think that's the way I heard someone say it one time, is because, so many people are watching you that you don't even realize that, maybe you going through what you went through allows them to get it allows them to get through what they're going through. Give them perspective that, I can get through this. If that person did that, I can do this, sort of thing.
I love that scripture.
Yeah. And so, that was something that, I leaned on, a ton. And also the fact that, going into my experience like India and like anti-human trafficking and stuff, one, realizing that football doesn't matter, but two,
after seeing some of that shit, you're like, okay, who cares?
Who gives a fuck if my knee hurts?
If I can't catch a slant route, like, who cares?
No, but like, I remember playing games, like in this safe house with girls in northern India from the ages of 9 to 16 years old. Some of them had spent 5 years being, raped every single day. And I'm there playing a board game with them, and they're like getting competitive and mad. And I'm just looking across and I'm like, how are you existing right now in a normal capacity?
Why do you care about this game at all?
Yeah. And that's what amazed me so much. And partially why I'm not, I don't know about you, but I'm not super enthralled by, I've met some, pretty cool people now, but I'm not enthralled by like any like starstruckness. Because like the most impressive individuals I met are 9-year-old girls who it's like just the fact that they're living is harder than I've ever had, like anything I ever hope anyone I love is ever going to go through. And the fact that they can like find a positive light and look into the eyes of a girl who was sold by her family. Many girls, and I think this is a reality that a lot of people don't know, in places like India or other kind of like third world areas, a lot of the time, these girls are sold by their families to feed their sons. And which I like having nieces, I don't have any kids, but couldn't imagine that even that's a thought. But having something like that sold into captivity and slavery, there's more slaves on earth now than there ever has been at any point in history. But the fact that those girls who had been rescued from this terror, who never got a normal childhood, stripped of any normalcy, can sit and play a board game with a dude he's never met and, God forbid, be competitive and try to like beat me, into it.
Insane.
It's like, it just doesn't connect, but it's like...
And you thought you were tough for being a football player. And meanwhile, this 9-year-old girl is way tougher than you could ever be.
100%. And that's the reality in some areas, in which why I constantly, whenever I speak at high schools and universities, bring this up, is because if there wasn't a demand, there wouldn't be a supply. And, even in the US, people think it doesn't happen. And I can guarantee you it does, because I didn't grow up in a small town, or I didn't grow up in a large town. It wasn't a small town, but a while back I got a message from someone who I vaguely remember knew, but went to a high school in our area, like where our paths had crossed. And she said, thank you for speaking out, because the entire time I was in high school, I was being trafficked. And it happens here in Utah. It happens in Vegas for sure. Having just came from there. Everywhere there's a major city or major, any demand, that's a reality. Like, there was girls who I met with in India who 2 weeks after they had, we had left and they had already been rescued, been rehabilitated, were on their way to get dresses, their dresses hemmed, and were recaptured. And I'd spent years now out of captivity, get recaptured, go in, just taken by some guys on the street. And then they're basically, and there was a guy who we called the or he deemed himself this, but the Indian 007 who like executed the raids and things to like help rescue these girls. And they had to virtually get like mercenaries to go and like find these girls because, you know, they would be transported by train around the country. And this might be heavy for people to hear, but, you know, it's a cause that I try to bring light to because you don't, and it's sad that you don't, but like on Cleats for a Cause or like athletes who have these huge stage who like, you know, obviously shed light on very, very good causes. You rarely see anyone talk about anti-human trafficking. You rarely see people. I think it's because of the nature of how explicit it is. People don't want to talk about it and shy away from it.
Even the good people don't want to talk about it.
No, and
which isn't good.
Yeah, and if you think about it, and I don't know if you ever paid attention to it, but like there's not many major public figures that openly speak out about it. And the only one I can really think of is Ashton Kutcher. I don't even know if you knew this, but he put his filming music career, or not music, it's like acting career on hold, basically. I think he still does some stuff, but that's his day job, is fighting human trafficking. Tim Tebow, I believe, is the same. But for a cause that there are, 28 odd million minors, in the world estimated being trafficked.
How much?
I think it's 28 odd million. And that's human trafficking. That's not necessarily sexual trafficking, but just minors in general, labor trafficking, sexual trafficking across, India, China, US, South America, everything. That there aren't public figureheads, speaking out as openly about it. And even now, thinking of things, not to get into it, but like the Epstein thing, where it's like these are, crazy potential celebrities that have been involved in stuff like that. And it's like, we need people to be able to speak out because, that 9-year-old girl who's been raped more times than I've taken a breath today, doesn't have a voice at all. And it's just, it's sickening. It's gut wrenching. I remember flying home on the flight from India and I'm just writing just constantly, just like my experiences and things, because I just didn't want to forget. And I plan to go back, and I still stay in contact and things like that. But and I hope, or I know that it's a passion of mine throughout my entire life now. But like it just sickens me because I'm like, why isn't this a bigger, like why aren't more people talking about this?
It's kind of like I give this example a lot, but the movie American Sniper.
Yeah.
When he comes home from his first tour and he has his pregnant wife and they're going to the hospital, and she's like, you need to like be in the moment, and like she's like, what's wrong with you? Type of thing. And he's like, and he just goes off like, what's wrong with me is we're at war right now. People are dying, and look around. No one cares. No one cares. No one's talking about it. And like I think and I went through that with my family. Like once people left and went back to reality, and I was not back to reality yet. Like I kind of had that similar feeling as I just walk around like no one cares. Like, who cares about the gas prices or whatever? Like, it's over. The world's over in my mind.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me switch these batteries out, and I got some questions about this.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Many questions running through my head with the sex trafficking stuff. So you save these girls. What do you do with them? You bring them back to the States, or like where do you go from there?
Yeah. So what we specifically did was more of a rehabilitation thing in India, where these kind of independent, government agencies, do raids in these girls, and then there's safe houses around the country that they go to. And so what our purpose there was to honestly help rehabilitate the image, that they have of men, to be able to incorporate themselves back into the world. Because as you can imagine, these girls, they like any male they see, and naturally so. And so, it's more so surrounded on that, being able to properly rehabilitate their image.
A guy walks in the room and they literally think like, okay, I'm gonna have sex with this guy probably. Like that's where that's just their natural. That's their normal life. When we first got there, and this was me, and my old coach brought me there with another couple of like players. We're like, big Division I football players, right? And it's like, one, we're the biggest individuals around.
like I found that in China and in India. We were just larger than the average human there.
What are they giving you a pistol and you're like John Wick over there? Like, what is your job? What are you doing?
Our job was solely, we went over there because there was a conference that we were kind of raising awareness for, but then also specifically helping with the safe house specifically.
Like playing games with them, like that.
Playing in more of like a therapeutic sense, also helping them with, just things they needed at the safe house. That was, something we did, whether it just be repairs and stuff like that. But just mostly it was helping them rehabilitate their image, and realizing that they don't have to be scared, around. There are male figures that
care. How long are you doing? Like they send you out there for a month, 3 months?
We went out there just for a few, few weeks or so.
And anyone can do this or what?
There's organizations that do, put it on. This was more so through an organization. Just my coach was affiliated with.
You kind of knew the right people.
Yeah. I think anyone, can. There are independent organizations. There's a large one called like Polaris Project. And even if just looking up, every major city has some sort of task force or volunteer program or things like that, whether even a lot of it is sometimes like women's shelters, are huge, aids to those in like independent like cities and things like that. But yeah, more so right now, as much as I can't, not in a position to go back as frequently as I'd like, and hopefully in the next 12 months or so will. My job, I think, is to that kind of demand and supply that we talked about, where I need to raise awareness with young boys, especially with pornography, all stuff like that as well. Because if there was no demand, there'd be no supply.
Yeah, let's talk about this for a second, and we probably won't. We don't know, but I think it's worth a try to talk about it. Okay. If you get people talking about it,
yeah.
But okay, here's my thoughts. I think it's two options because one part of me is like, we should be able to just shut this down. Like, how is this black web thing? How is it even a thing? Like, we have people. It should be able to just get shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like powerful people, I think, like keeping this thing going, type of thing. Like it gets pretty evil.
Yeah,
it has to be, right? Or like
in third world countries where there's like it's part of the demand. There are people in power. Where there's just corrupt nations and things like that.
Yeah, like all the evil and the corruption and stuff. Or like, is it more of, so an example in my life, and obviously this is not close to the same thing, but I went to Virginia, did this speaking. It was like a 3-day speaking gig. I spoke at all these juvenile detention centers in Virginia. It was awesome. I love the people I met. Mm-hmm. It was awesome. And we were just doing some small chat, and I asked them, like, so what percentage of these kids are going to be back in the system? And they kind of chuckled, like, oh, like, they'll be back. Like, they've already been here. They've been back, like, 90-something%. And in my mind, I'm like, what, like, so this isn't working.
Well, yeah.
Like, what are we, but then.
Also with that thought, you wonder, it's like, well, then why am I here?
Yeah.
It
went back to, like, all right, no one cares. Like, and these are great people. Like, who are in charge, like I met them, like very nice, but like really, I think, and me too. It's not like I hopped on a plane and left. I didn't care that. I didn't offer to like I'll adopt one of like I didn't like. I just told my story. That was the best I did, and then left. So like, you want. We're both motivational speakers. We're trying to change the world, even though we both know it won't happen.
It won't matter.
But we're trying.
Yeah.
So, like, is it so much evil and corruption, or is it more just ego and we love to be comfortable? And what I mean by that is, at the end of the day, we don't care enough. And we don't care enough because the number one thing we care about is me and maybe my kids and my family. And like, I think people who are getting these spots of power where they can make a bigger difference than most people can, like me and you, I think they start off with good intentions and then ego, they want to get comfortable. And it doesn't become about trying to help anymore. It becomes about trying to get them still in the game or move up the ladder. And same thing we're talking about with sports. Like it starts off with a good idea, and now all they care about is money and being on ESPN magazine type of thing.
Now, did you ever read Meditations?
By Marcus Aurelius?
Yeah.
One of the few things I read.
Yeah, so there's, and not to go back in the podcast when we said we weren't get too philosophical, but
let's go for it. We're here now.
Yeah, but there's a quote in there that is one of my favorites, and it's super short. It's do not participate in grief or ecstasy. And how I interpret that is don't voluntarily participate in it, because it's both of the natural ecstasy in life, the joy and happiness, like it'll come, and so will grief. And so if you participate too much in your own grief and sit in your own grief, you're going to deprive yourself of that naturally occurring ecstasy that comes into your life.
Right.
And also, but if you participate too much in ecstasy and try to repress the things you're struggling through, try to numb your pain, whether it be drugs, alcohol, just totally
not talking
about it, anything like that, you're going to prolong your grief or create more grief for yourself.
Balance.
Yeah. And I honestly think, and I've never heard someone make this analogy, and I'm sure someone has, but I used to work in medical sales, and I was in an operating room where you constantly see the heart rate monitor, and a healthy heart rate is an even distribution, wavers around, goes up, spikes down, kind of has some little blips in between, and then goes up eventually again. And I was like, that is such a great metaphor to how we should live our life. And a healthy life, there's an occasional big spike. There's then going to be probably a spike down at some point, some little bumps, up and down along the way. And then a large spike will come, whether it be a birth of a child or a graduation or something.
Yeah.
But then if you think of someone who's trying to numb their pain or, trying to artificially create that ecstasy in their life, think of like someone on cocaine, what their heart rate is like. It's just, spike constantly, and you become obsessed with maintaining that spike. And I think that is a lot of the time when you get people in powerful, positions, they're trying to maintain that spike because their baseline is risen to like where they need that constant charge.
I like it. And I was a high school teacher, and it's the same thing. I think everyone who gets into teaching, it's definitely not for the money.
Yeah.
You want to change the world.
Yeah.
You want to make an impression on these young kids so you better their life.
Yeah.
And then it turns into what? Like the cranky old teacher who's been teaching history for 30 years, and they have their system and don't talk to them. Here's the packet. And all they care about is getting to retirement all of a sudden.
Yeah.
They lose. And I think that's just kind of human nature as we get older is, we just start to lose our love and passion to help the we. And it just becomes more about the me and the me and the me because we want to be comfortable. We want our steady job, and if that means playing the game and following along, then okay, I will.
Yeah.
And we just don't have like enough badasses anymore. There's like the Ashton Kutcher guy. Like we need more of those guys. Like what the hell?
Are
we doing?
Yeah. Seriously. And that guy, but by any stretch of the imagination, grew up in small. I don't know if you were like a That 70s Show fan.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, being like the goofy.
Didn't the other
actor Kelso?
Didn't the other actor like get in trouble for doing something with a minor? Or something?
He some sort of sexual. I forgot his name, but
that's just funny that the other guy they went two different. ways.
But there's so few people like that maintain that we mindset as they
and so what happens to them? Is it just the comfortability like we're talking about, or what is it? Like what is it?
I think just to what I said earlier, they've furnished their cell to a point where they don't want to
I was arguing with a buddy. I'm like, why people buying yachts shouldn't be it shouldn't be allowed. Until everyone on planet Earth is full, then maybe we can talk about yachts. And my friend was like, yeah, but what you don't understand is all these big words that I don't know. I'm like, okay. And then basically what he's saying is you create jobs though. People have to build the yacht. And then, so it's good for and I'm just like, listen, these billionaires or whatever, okay, create all the jobs. But how about you create jobs building a factory that makes food for people that are hungry?
Yeah.
That's my issue. Okay, it creates jobs, but you're missing the point. Humans want a yacht. Yeah. That's the problem it's not creating jobs. It's what we desire, where our focus is. But then here's the other thing. All of the rich billionaires. I think humanity in general, we would all agree, all these rich people at the top. if they spend all their money to feed everyone, get rid of sex trafficking, and, just help modern society, I think we'd all agree that that was a good idea.
Yeah.
However, if we force them to do it, it's wrong now.
Yeah.
Isn't that like a weird, fucked up thing with life? Like, the right choice, if you make someone do it against it becomes evil. Like, it becomes wrong. So, like, we can't.
You almost take the you take the good nature out of it.
It wouldn't work for some.
Same way, like, I hate when I see someone like, and you're stuck in this weird position where, like, God, that something good happened, but that also shitty. Like, when I see, like, someone on, like, social media go, like, make a video and hand a homeless person $1,000. I'm like, that's great, but, like, you're just doing it for views and the ad money. Like, it's just like, it's like you're making me feel like the asshole here because I don't think you should have gave that guy $1,000.
Right.
But it's like, why don't you just not film it?
Or just give him the $1,000.
Or it's like, I would rather, like, I mean, that's just like a hard thing to, like, manage. It's like, I can't, anything you did right there, I almost think less of you now, like, because of it. Like, I always give everyone a baseline level of respect that, like, and I don't dislike you, I don't like you, I give you a reason for me to like you or not. But, in that sense, I'm looking, I'm like, I don't think your intentions are pure, doing something like that. And so, I mean, that's a whole different conversation. But I think, to that point, it's, you want people to help other people as much as possible, but you want them to want to do it, you know, and trying to, probably it goes back to a little bit of trying to make that butterfly effect where we inflict, some joy or, try to change someone as a speaker where they kind of pass along that and, hopefully make the world a better place, even though we both know it's not going to matter. You know what I mean? But, like, that's a tough thing. Cause like I said earlier, I hope to be as wealthy as possible without subjecting or, like, pushing aside my, like, morals and values and things like that. I mean, cause at some point I heard Jim Carrey said it not too long ago. And he said, you probably won't hear a celebrity say this, but, like, I have enough, like, I'm done. Sort of thing. Like, I'm happy. I enjoy painting now, like, helping out. I don't know if he does any philanthropic stuff, but, like, you know what I mean? Like, at some point you'll have enough and being okay with enough.
Right. Well, that goes back to, I mean, this is like, we're kind of bouncing back and forth, but I like it. But that goes back to the Tom Brady thing. Like, he had enough money. Like, what's the difference between $1 million and $5 million? Like, that's, I don't know. There becomes, like, a point where, like, isn't $1 billion and $180 billion? It's like the same. Like,
so it's like now, what are we? 8 generations of your family don't have to work instead of 10.
And, like, I can't. Okay, so your father, alcoholic. We kind of got off the rails there, but
it's all right.
That was great. That was fun. Father's alcoholic. That kind of propels you into the public speaking. Your college football career isn't what you wanted it to be, but you did end up playing, right? Like, you kept your promise.
I played 3 games in college. As many reconstruction surgeries as I had in college, I played in an equal amount of games.
So I haven't been injured a whole lot through my basketball career, luckily. And it's not football. Like, you guys are really hitting each other out there. I remember
I picked the wrong position. Like, I often say I can have a mind of steel, but a body of a pork rind. Like, it's just.
What was your position?
I was a running back, and so I picked the most brutal position, arguably, with the probably biggest injury proneness.
Yeah, I remember when I was playing college basketball, they asked the basketball players, like, do you guys want to be the ball boys for the football games? Like, throw the footballs to the ref when they mark it. I'm like, that sounds awesome. Like, I love football. Like, I get to be on the sidelines. So I do it, and, like, they are smacking each other. Like, they are hit. I'm like, I'm glad I play basketball. This is... So, like, my question was, you have all these injuries as a football player. Like, it is in your head. Like, you are worried about it. People can come from wherever to hit you. What was the mentally, how were you with the injuries? Like, was it on, you know what I mean? Like,
I love that you're asking this, because no one ever asked me this.
Right. But, like, it like can really just ruin you as a player. Like, cause can I make this cut on my ankle? And then you have linebackers flying in. It's like, oh, it has to be so not good.
And no one's ever asked, or no one has asked me this in a long time, because if you ask anyone I played with, I wasn't the best running back that I've played with. I'm not going to say that, but no one I played with across my entire career ran as hard as I did, as far as just running. Like, I wasn't like a super, speedy guy, but running as hard as I can. I was a very old school type of like in between the tackles type of running back. I wasn't going to blaze by. And so it's like it was funny. I kind of created the joke, but the joke was, if you need 5, I'll get you 7. If you need 10, I'll get you 12. But if you need 20, I might get you 16. Like, so,
like you don't have the big play capability.
No, I never played with anyone who ran as hard as me. However, I also, every time I touched the ball, I was scared which I don't think enough, or like, maybe they don't admit it because it's not true, but I had to get myself to admit that because the reason I was recruited to play was because of my running style. And you and me talked about being authentic. And after all my injuries, someone said, like, well, why don't you go out of bounds? Or why don't you, could have,
it's just not
to protect your body. And I'm like, I'm not the player that was recruited if I do that.
Yeah, I might as well just retire then. Like,
it's not how I'm going to play. I'm not going to subject myself to being not the version of the player that my coaches recruited me.
I love that so much.
And so I'm like, I'm willing to get injured playing the way whatever happens, happens. Like, if I play, I play. And I became very comfortable with that thought, more so after I went to India and I went to China, and I realized, like, don't give a fuck that I'm playing football right now. But that almost made me play harder because I realized, like, I'm playing for my best friend that's next to me. I'm playing for that promise.
I'm playing for this moment.
I'm playing for the, the promise I made to my family. Like, I went from trying to play for thousands to playing for a handful of people that I, truly cared about and things like that. And, it made me run harder. And anyone who you won't find any clips of me outside of my high school play of running the ball.
No 20-yard runs for you.
No, I had some some killer practice film. I could ask my coach to kind of send it over if you want a solid intro. But like I played well. And the joke I made when my teammates and my good friends were like, dude, you're actually good at football. And I was like, I know that, but like no one else does.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going to change the way I played because that's the only way I knew. And to make the Buffalo analogy, like I had to go, wasn't thinking about it at the time, but like I had to go through and, I think dancing around it or running away from like the authentic way that I played football. Like, I don't know if would have had the discipline to overcome the things like with my dad and everything like that.
I did want to get back to that because I think playing sports growing up did help me handle grief, and just because sports teaches you can't give up. What can you control?
Yeah.
Showing up repeatedly. And I think those are things that really help someone dealing with grief. And I think the people I lost too, that's helped me handle it. Like Courtney, Riggins, Frankie, like who they were, Race Rider, like, yeah, they keep me going. They made me who I am today type of thing. But I also had good parents too. And I remember I was a very good basketball player when I was younger. And I tried out for this this basketball team, this traveling team. And they had 2 teams, and I got put on the B team. And I should have been on the A team. I'm not like, I should have been. And I remember my dad is telling me that I'm on the B team. And he doesn't talk poorly of any coach. Actually, he talks highly of the coaches. He's like, I think this is a good opportunity for you because I think these are good coaches that know the game. Mm-hmm. He's like, they want you to be on the B team. And he said, I am excited about that because I think you'll be able to shoot more, handle the ball. He presented it as a good thing, and he never complained once.
Yeah.
And he never told me how to handle it. He never said, we're not going to complain. He just showed me when he told me. And I like, those are the moments in sports that really helped me today as a father and going through grief. Is my parents were so good. They never made excuses for me. Like, yeah, like this, what are you going to do about it type of thing without ever telling that to me. And I owe them a lot for that. And that goes back to the sports. And this is going to be a rhetorical question, but sports helped you handle your dad and a lot of the trials that you went through in life.
Yeah, 100%. And I think I lucked out. I mean, I grew up with the single mom for the most part of my life that, I lucked out with having coaches that were very strong, individuals who pushed me and were positive influences in my life and things like that, where I just lucked out. I think in that regard, having people who, kept me on the right path. Just to throw it out there, like my defensive coordinator, who I loved in high school. I didn't really play defense, a lot running back, but he was a huge part of my life. He was a police officer. My parole officer, who was like the most important guy. Like I'll go see him when I go back to Washington here in a couple of days. He was a parole officer, huge former Division I football player. My running back coach was a police officer. Showed up to.
Why aren't you a police officer then?
Yeah, I mean, that's. Well, because the plan was to be a college football coach, because I wanted to be a coach like they were for me. That was the initial plan.
You like the public speaking? You don't want to coach?
I realized that when I took a step back from the sport of football, I realized that, and talking about being mission oriented, my goal was to be a college football coach, but I'm like, I might be restricting myself to how many people I could, help or like touch or reach, by limiting myself just to football. And so I love it. And I think there would be a point in my life where I think I might want to get back into, doing things of that nature. But I think I found I was like, I can scratch that itch
later.
But doing other things like speaking or, giving my phone number to every athlete I speak to, or hopping on, telling you before, like hopping on an 1.5-hour call, helping a athlete I spoke to prepare for his first speaking gig and things like that, like I can reach a wider demographic of people at some point. Like I think my coaches were everything to me. And there's something to be said for being able to inflict change in a small group on a daily basis and things like that. But I was like, maybe that was a bit of a hindering or a limiting belief that was the only type of demographic I could speak to, because I think I could help an art student in New York as much as I could help, a football player in Texas.
You could help anyone. The thing with people is some people are already going to have made up in their mind, like, I don't relate to this guy, you can't help me. Yeah. And that's too bad. But I think you can learn. I mean, I've learned from everyone on my podcast. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I keep doing it is you just keep learning a lot. My
offensive coordinator took me to India. I was talking to him a couple of weeks ago, and he said, the thing about you, and I don't know if you thought about this, is your story is not a football story. Football was the vessel, but it's not a football story. Yeah. And I thought about that, and I was like, man, like it's true. Like that's where I get the thought of like I can help or a New York art student as much as I think I could help is that true? I don't know, but I think I can, Yeah. So, that's why I think it was a little bit of a limiting belief. And, if I get back into coaching high school football or college football, I don't think just the time constraint of recruiting and what goes into college football, I don't think that's the route, but I would love to be able to, in some capacity, get back in working with athletes and things like that on a more regular basis.
We got to start wrapping this up, and we still got to get to your movies.
Oh man, I've been teeing these up. I'm a big movie guy.
Yeah, you texted me last night. I got my movies. Yeah, I'm like, all right. When I do public speaking, it's mostly I talk about how no one cares, and you have to care, type of thing. Mm-hmm. I talk about we is greater than me. I tell that story about my brother race in the boxing match. I talk about the night of the accident, and then I do the buffalo cow analogy. So I guess like my main message is we is greater than me, don't give up, be a buffalo. And you don't have to give it all away, but like when you're speaking, like what's kind of your message, or what are some key points that you're really trying to get out to people that you think can help them? And if you don't mind, we'd love hearing.
Yeah, and I think the overarching message is the Romans 5:3-4, that we not only so but we glory in our suffering, because suffering produces perseverance.
Well, don't say it like you've say it good.
Sorry, but you know what I mean. Like I think that verse is that umbrella. I think I tell my story, and I kind of chronologically, like I almost talk or say it in chapters, where it's like this is the chapter, and then highlight it with a lesson that I learned and how it applies to their life for once, like that verse, but also being able to wield your suffering. I think suffering's a double-edged sword. I think it makes you most equipped to help others, but I also think it's the thing that most inflicts pain on yourself. obviously. And, I think the only way to, deal with your grief, deal with your suffering in general is to help others with theirs. And, I think the overarching themes would be like that verse, wielding your suffering, but also being able to even more so rely on that hope piece, because, for me, that's what I hope to provide to someone, even if it's just an ounce of hope, an example of, the example we talked about where, people are going to witness you who you don't even know are watching, getting through your day. And that thought in my head of, someone's watching me right now go through what I'm going through, and it's helping them, even if it's true or not. I think more people need to realize that. And I'll tell a quick story, because people dismiss how much impact they can have on the world. And when I was in India, went to a slum one day, working. There was like a little school there that we're helping out with. And there was in the slum, there was a guy who had his little hut, didn't have hardly anything, but he had like a little couch outside that you probably would find with a free sign out here in St. George, but the pride on his face to just be able to offer us anything, but offer us a seat, right? And even if it's small to him, where it's just like a place for us to sit in his like hut, right? He didn't understand the impact he had on me. He probably never will. And one, he spoke Hindi and not English, so you couldn't have told him. But I think people, a lot of the time, they dismiss what they have to offer the world and don't understand that how much impact that it can have on the other people in it. And so I think that overall, whatever your mission is, whatever your passion, is, I think most people just diminish how much they can truly invoke change, in the world, whether it be in just your community, whether it be on a podcast, whether it be, what have you. I think that overall, probably a long-winded way of answering it, but yeah.
No, I want to ask you, and you kind of already answered it in our podcast, because you're talking about how you didn't talk a lot, you were quiet. But I just wanted to ask you, because you're very, you're not shy. Like, you'll get out there and talk. And that's hard for a lot of people to do. A lot of people don't want to talk about themselves or their issues or their pain or grief. But I just want to ask you again, because I think getting people to talk is huge.
Yeah.
And I think what I like to tell people is like, hey, like, you might not know how to describe it. You might not know how to label it or whatever. Yeah. And it might be confusing. And you might contradict yourself. You might not make sense.
Yeah.
But, like, you need to start talking. And as you start talking, just like anything else in your life, football, basketball, whatever, you'll get better at it. And you'll start to find the words. And then you can embrace the grief better or whatever it is. And not let it control you so much. And you can start to control it. But I just wanted to ask you again, like, any advice, or like what flipped the switch for you to start talking?
I think it was having an overwhelming amount of people tell me that I had something to say. Because I diminish my story all the time. It's like, do I even really have enough to say to...
Man, you sound like my buddy Ryan.
Like,
who does the audio for
But I constantly hear that, but then I'll get, someone to give me solid feedback. And, I'll be like, all right, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. Then I'm like, I hear someone else's story. I'm like, my story's not shit. you know what I mean?
So funny. Yeah, the comparison.
Comparison. And I think, what made me do so is that, everyone has a story to share, a song to sing, what have you. And it doesn't matter if it, inflicts or, connects like that with that one kid while two other kids walk out the room, sort of deal. Like, I think if you have, there's an old Steve Prefontaine quote.
Man, you know a lot of people, man. Throwing out all these names.
I spent a lot of time reading. I mean, I don't know if you know who he is, but he was a former runner at Oregon. I think he died in an accident in like the 60s or something, but it was always up in our weight room. And it says, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice your gift. And I think that is like my ultimate fear. And one thing, I don't know if you've heard before, the analogy that, one day you're going to meet the version of yourself that you could have been, whether that be true or not. I like to believe it. I heard David Goggins and another guy, Ed Milet, say it. But then I started thinking to myself, what about if everyone I love also gets to meet the person I could have been, as well as the person I ended up being? And what would their thought be if I didn't? Why did I deprive them of that version of myself, or things of that nature? And I think thinking about it is just like, I want to be the best I can be is great. But I mean, I think of, there's two pains in life: pain of discipline, pain of regret. And it's just that fear of, in that theoretical scenario, me being so far apart from the person I could have been and depriving the people I love, of that. And I think speaking fell into my lap with that. And I realized I could help people. And I realized if I don't do it, then I'm sacrificing that gift. Not saying I'm a gifted speaker, because like I said early on, I put the and dumb whenever I was speaking. But
I think, everyone does.
But at the same time, I think if I don't do it, and there's someone out there who needs to hear my story, maybe I hit them at the right time, sort of thing, where they're really struggling with whatever it might be. Who am I to deprive a person, from that? If you were, I don't know if you've done this before, I doubt you have, but if someone offered you to come speak if there was someone really struggling, maybe that you were connected with or something, who had maybe lost someone, and they're like, dude, they're in really bad shape. It's like, I assume you would feel compelled to be like, all right, let me hop on a 10-minute phone call with them. I could probably help them with it. Something like that. It's like, who am I to deprive someone, of that if I can help them?
Yeah. I love that idea. I love the quote of, trying to become your best self. I do also think maybe the yin to that yang would be, I do think you need to balance it with appreciating and loving who you are, though. You are enough.
Yeah,
is another quote I like.
Yeah, there was a term that another speaker I heard, say, it was like blissful dissatisfaction, like being okay with
Not
knowing,
being okay, but
but being okay with knowing, pursuing your best self, and also knowing you're never going to attain it.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Kind of like us, try to change the world.
Yeah, we're not doing shit.
Same idea. Anything else you want to say before we get into movies?
Dude, we covered a bunch, man.
I think we covered pretty good.
Yeah, we thought we did pretty well.
You flew out here, we might as well. Yeah. Top 3 movies then?
Yeah. There's one. My first 2 are pretty stagnant. They're set in stone.
All right.
Good Will Hunting is my number 1.
It's not your fault.
No, exactly.
I know.
But so what I talked about, why I love that movie, is because that entire movie is about repressing your emotions, repressing your feelings, and how it changes and how it affects your interpersonal relationships, your approach to life. If you look at that movie through that lens of how his past trauma affected his girlfriend, affected his outlook on life, his friendship, everything. And, it's a great movie, but when I watch it probably once or twice a year, when I started looking through it for that lens, it's like I saw myself in that character a bit, and I love just the overall story of that. Number 2,
hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Do you like apples?
I love apples.
Well, I got a number. Yeah. So how do you like them apples?
That is one of the best scenes. That is one of the best scenes. But the not your fault.
That one gets to me. I like when because Will tries to just break all the psychiatrists he sees.
Yeah.
And he breaks Robin Williams.
Yeah.
The first time, because of this painting of the sailboat, and he talks about his dead wife, and he chokes him. And I love that scene too. Yeah.
And in that, in that as well, being, what we just talked about, being our suffering equipped, Robin Williams' character, in that to help him, because he saw it because it was a kid from Southie, that was, really struggling, boy genius, what have you. And I think, I've just always that's just a comfort movie for me.
That's a great movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Number 2 would be Interstellar. Big Matthew McConaughey fan.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Dude, Interstellar, just
the bookcase. You're just anxiety.
Yeah, just the anxiety is just through.
And then you're piecing it together. You're like, wait a minute.
Yeah, and then I don't know how many the amount of stupid conversations between my roommates in college that we had, and we were like, but it doesn't work because of the physics. Like, that's not really accurate or realistic. And it's like,
you're all physics experts all of a sudden.
I'm like my buddy Jordan. I'm like, dude, you are studying pharmacy. Like, you're not. We're not physicists.
Yeah, I like it when Matt Damon's a complete prick in that movie, by the way.
Yeah. But so he's an example.
You got 2 Matt Damon movies so far.
Yeah. Well, he plays a smaller part, but yeah.
Yeah, he's in there.
But I think to that point, I had never even really thought about this. He uses his grief and suffering to inflict on other people, to try and, save himself rather than like give to others. And like that's the other end of grief, where
you just want people to hurt like you.
Misery loves company.
Let's burn this down.
Yeah, misery loves company. Misery needs company. Right? Yeah. There's that two ends to that, and I think that's just a beautiful movie that I love. Number 3, I'm actually making I'm a last second audible.
Oh wow.
I was going to say The Dark Knight, the second Batman movie, because of a specific scene. One, I love Heath Ledger in that, but there's a scene in that where the Batman's like, why do you want to or why are you trying to kill me? And he's like, I'm not trying to kill you. And I think that's the balance of like good and evil. He's like, what would I do without you? Sort of thing. And that scene, I think, is so powerful, because I don't think evil forces in the world, whether you're religious, you just believe in like the universe's energy, what have you. It's like if evil didn't have good, it wouldn't have anything, because he's known as like the master of chaos, and there wouldn't be chaos if there wasn't someone trying to create order. And it's just this balance of like conflicting, right. And I just think it's a beautiful just connection between it. And listen, I love comic book movies. I was a big Marvel fan up until recently. They kind of dropped off for me, but up until like I've always loved them. But that scene and that just movie as a whole, I think, have so many underlying messages like that, where it's just the balance between, there's a relationship between good and evil. Without one, you don't have the other, and if there has to be as equally evil things in the world as there's equally good.
It's kind of, I don't know how we got here, if there's a God or not, but like I think the world we live in is a combination of order and chaos. Yeah. And Batman and Joker do such a good job. Like Joker gets all the money, burns it.
Yeah.
So it's not about the money. It's about the message.
Yeah.
And like you almost, there's so many parts of the Joker you almost like. Like you're like, you like the bad guy. That's what they did with Bane too. But like, and then the Joker's like, I don't have a plan. If I'm like a dog chasing cars, I don't know what to do if I caught it. Yeah. Like,
well, and
it's very like I like that movie a lot.
If you want to think about it from a religious perspective, which I have friends who we've talked about this as well. Theoretically, if in a Christian perspective, with the devil can't actually create anything, but what he can do is manipulate the world around you and allow you to choose your free will to his like wishes, essentially. Yeah. And obviously probably people have different interpretations, but this was the conversation me and my friend had. So if it's completely wrong and stupid, someone biblical study person can feel free to.
I usually just ask my friends, like, why doesn't God just kill Satan? And that usually, because they don't have a whole lot of good things. They don't know. And I don't know either.
Personally, I think that's the same thing. Like, without him, there wouldn't, like, if everything was good, nothing would be good. And same reason where I'm a Christian. However, and this is probably unpopular amongst a lot of Christians, is I don't feel the need to convert people to Christianity, because I think if everyone was a Christian, no one would be a Christian, because it would just be blind faith and blind acceptance.
What would all these Christians do if everyone joined? They'd be like, oh.
They're like, but then every offspring, like every child we had after that would just be like, all right, this is what we do and accept. Yeah. Like, but why? And I think that's why it's called a faith, and that's why every religion should. If you want to join, great. If you don't, great. Like, you know, sort of deal. And so I think the dichotomy of you need one to have the other, and in that biblical sense of God created free will, and He also gave, or not gave, but like the power of Satan is to act on your free will to get you to do evil things into your impulses and things like that. And hope you make more right decisions than you do wrong, hopefully. But that ultimately, I think that's what free will is. That's a different. I didn't know we were going to go down that route, but
look at it. We could talk for another hour.
Yeah.
No, there's another Stoic quote I like that says, the world isn't full of good and evil. It's a place for good and evil to happen.
Yeah.
And it kind of like, who are you going to be? Are you going to be good or evil?
Yeah.
But it's kind of up to you. But
yeah,
we better stop now before. No, hold on.
Third movie.
Yeah, what was your? Because you listed 3, but you weren't going to originally do Batman, so that was a curveball.
Yeah.
So what was your other one?
So I wasn't. So Batman was the one I'm putting out.
Okay,
actually, But the one that supplanted it, because I watched it recently, I remembered how amazing it was. Is Warrior.
I love that
with
one.
Tom Hardy. Oh my god,
that song at the end.
Yeah, when he's just walking out and just like leaning on.
My brother Race loved that movie too.
Yeah,
and Courtney, we watched all the time.
That movie brings me to tears because I see the. Probably to some extent. Actually, I know to some extent. I see a bit of my dad in.
I was gonna say that scene where the dad relapses.
Yeah.
Is hard. I bet that's a hard scene for you.
I have trouble watching it, if I'm being honest. And I also want to say that movie is not depicting of my relationship with my dad.
Right.
He never beat the shit out of me, and I don't want to say that.
No, yeah.
But it was very much in that sense of like I was taking care of my dad. In the hospital and things like that when he relapsed and trying to make him comfortable and, things like that. And then I realized like all my resentment went out the window because I was like, no one would choose to live like this. And you start looking back, it was like, why is he like this? And it's like, my grandfather was like this. And why was my grandfather like this? Well, my grandfather's, dad died of cancer when he was 12 years old and when he was, born in Idaho. And this was a crazy story is when I was in the hospital room with my dad. I forgot about this up until this moment. But the guy sitting next to us in the ER, we were there for 17 hours. So we got to chat with him. He was an older guy, probably 80s, late 80s, all by himself. And we're like, he started knowing some of the places that my dad knew before my dad started kind of losing his, trains of thoughts and mind. And in the Grays Harbor area of Washington. And I said, well, where are you from? And he said, Wallace, Idaho. And that was where my grandfather was born in like the 20s. And that is a small town right now. I think about 800 people.
Oh, wow.
And I remember I had an eerie feeling. I'm like, how is someone from the same area as my grandfather, who's passed away, suffered from great addiction, was part of the probably some of the reason my dad did. A guy from that same town, this tiny like mining town in the middle of nowhere, Idaho, to sit next to me. So I was like,
synchronicities.
Yeah, but then that whole thing of just generations like coming together, like I almost felt like my grandfather was, there, in that moment and things like that. But it was such a powerful thing for me. And I know that's when I kind of knew that it wasn't going to pass on with me. But nonetheless, to get back to the Warrior, I saw a lot of that story and you begin to now empathize with you see how much regret is in his father's eyes. And not to say that what he did wasn't good in that movie or wasn't terrible and awful, but you see the pain and, in that sense, I lost resentment or any anger I had towards my dad. And, I think in that moment, he, the actor Tom Hardy in that moment, to an extent did as well. And that movie just breaks me every time, but I love it.
And like the communication again.
Yeah.
Like they split up. Tommy goes with his dad and the other guy goes with his mom. And then like they resent each other because they never talk.
Yeah.
And like, that's just what happens in grief, man.
Yeah.
Like it can get so bad with the ones you love the most because you have similar pain and you can just get ugly so fast. Yeah. But that's why you got to talk about it.
Yeah.
Or you end up fighting each other in the UFC championship.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah.
I don't know how likely that is though.
Yeah.
But anyway, you got a good movie list, man. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for showing up. Flew all the way from Texas. When are you going home? You flying home tonight, or what are you doing?
So I'm flying home to Seattle tonight. I'm just going home to see some more family. So it just happened. We're Austin to here, then back to Seattle. I'm doing an alpine hike at like 5 a.m. tomorrow morning.
There
so
you go.
I'm gonna be tired, but I'm meeting up with a buddy to do it. And whenever I get to see mountains, I try to get back to it. But yeah,
that's awesome. Well, I hope you enjoy your visit. And life's 10% what happens to you, and 90% what you're gonna do about it.